question I believe this is a young woman. I'm 23 years old with Asperger diagnosis. I like the way I am, but would like to have friends and a boyfriend. Not so easy. Don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm good on the computer. Is there an online class I can take to help me?
Good Lord. Have I ever been stumped by a question? I don't know. Let me just think. That's a tough one. First of all, I'm not sure what's out there to help this person. I'm trying to go through my head and think of, is there anything... You know, it's funny, Shannon, because we do have a lot of adult Asperger's people asking us, how do I get a girlfriend, for instance. That's, I think, even harder than just how do I get friends, or what is wrong with getting friends. I think that if, you know, it sounds like this person is very functioning almost normally in many ways, and perhaps what might benefit you is some of the books that are out there for all of us, and like, for instance, Dale Carnegie's what is it? How to Make Friends.
How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Right. So there are books out there that kind of talk about what types of things actually bring you friends as a whole. That's easier to do because I think there are certain rules about that. You know, like you could say, empathy, the development of empathy, or having some sense of being able to see other people's perspectives, being able to have, empathetic towards people's needs and issues. Those types of things tend to increase your friends. Being non-judgmental. There are certain rules that you can follow, and that's easier. In terms of relationships, excuse me, I don't think there are any rules. I mean, I think everyone has problems with relationships to some extent. I think once and I definitely think you have to get a little bit better at just having friends first, and then hopefully someone who is a friend then goes beyond just friendship, and then you develop a relationship, because I think that relationships should be formed based on friendship as well. And so I think you take it a step at a time, and perhaps you start out with just general, self-help books like Carnegie's or any others that are out there on how to make friends, because they're just, there's a series of things that you have to keep in mind and try to do those things. And then relationships, there's so much that you could be the perfect friend and the perfect partner, and yet you will possibly come across people who have their own issues, and your relationships may go up and down, and who knows, so it's harder to have the right expectations from just following a set of rules.
Absolutely. And
it's a hard one.
It is a very hard one, and I'm not aware of an online class, but there are a couple of places if you're good at the computer, there are places where you can meet with other individuals that are on the spectrum and have conversations and make friends, and sometimes make connections. I mean, we certainly have heard of people hooking up on the Hotspot. And also wrongplanet.net. We have Alex Plank on the show on a regular basis, and he has a very interesting site that's just about Asperger issues. That's awesome. And that you can connect with people and ask questions and make friends. And even, we've shown it here on the show before, Alex did a video on how to flirt. It's really cute. It's just the sweetest thing.
That's awesome.
Where an expert in the field teaches Alex how to flirt.
That's terrific.
So, an interesting way to connect with people. And then in your travels, if you find a class online, let us know.
Let us know,
we'd like to know about that.
Right, absolutely.
Okay, let's take a look here. We've got another question that comes in parts. Thank you for all you do. Oh, we started on that one. My question is, how can we ever thank you for what you have done for our child and countless other children?
Oh, that's so nice.
That's a very sweet one.
Thank you.
A person who wants to know, how can I get my husband on board? He still thinks our son is just fine and will outgrow this. That's a hard one.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. People are convinced by different things. You know your husband better. Sometimes people are convinced by standardized testing, so that might be a good way to go. Sometimes parents think that their child has very minimal issues, and when we do standardized testing, so like language testing that are normed so that you can have a comparison of all other kids that age, that helps, because then it's just, it's kind of like a score, and the score is, if it's 1 or 2 standard deviations below the norm, then it becomes something real. There's tests for everything, standardized tests for everything. You would need an assessment center or a psychologist who knows autism. Our assessment centers are very, very good, and I recommend that you do contact us if you are. Our assessors actually travel to many states. Not all states, because we have to be licensed in the state that you test. If you come to California, obviously, we're happy to assist you and do assessments. But if your husband's not on board, I doubt that would happen. So I think it's more a matter of just trying to get an assessment done so that you can see the deficits, and the other thing is, I think sometimes parents get into these, like moms are very intuitive and they start to see things earlier, because we all know our kids really very, very well. And sometimes for dads it's just harder, because accepting that there might be something wrong is too personal an issue, and it's just a big issue for them. It's just harder for them to accept that. So I wouldn't keep pushing it, because I think sometimes our dads just become, they feel like they're in a corner and everybody's pushing them, and they become a little defensive. But it is important, I suppose, for you to really highlight the things that concern you, and perhaps get a third party involved who can give an objective perspective of whether those things are actually delayed or not. Teachers are often very good for this. Sometimes if you have a family doctor who knows the family pretty well, that might be a good person to speak with him. I know you're doing a segment for dads, aren't you?
Yeah, we're doing a dads roundtable. I really feel like this is a portion of the autism community that doesn't get enough light shed on it. That it's a different experience for the dads. I mean, it would be very easy for me to sit and say, oh, it's the same thing, but it isn't. It's a very different experience for the dads. And we've heard that time and time again, and yet I really am looking forward to, we're having 5 dads sit down and talk about what it's been like. And they're at different places on their journey, and we're going to be thrilled to show that to you guys in about a month and a half. I'm really looking forward to it, because I can't remember which dad it was. It might have been Matt Asner, but one of the dads came in and said that they felt helpless until they knew that there was something. They couldn't just have their child have autism. They just couldn't deal with that until they knew that there was something they could do to help them. Right. And then they could get on board.
And that's so, it makes sense perfectly, right? I mean, you don't want to, most of us we might be overwhelmed with a diagnosis, but as long as we know that there's some problem solving or some way to come to a possible solution or help it, then that empowers us. And you just feel completely, and that's the biggest issue for dads, I think, because the dad's role, I think, in the family, a lot of dads tell me their thing is, protection and taking care of the family and safety and making sure that everybody's okay. And when someone's not okay and the dad is completely left helpless,
exactly.
I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. That's just so overwhelming.
It is.
And they blame themselves, I think. And
I think for women, it's socially acceptable for us to have a few tears. It's socially acceptable for us to get angry and have a moment and express our feelings, and it's socially acceptable for us to sit down with other women and say, I'm having this kind of a day and it feels like this, and we get at least a little bit of an outlet, hopefully. But for the dads, we keep hearing that it's very much the silent, the
Right.
strong silent thing that they're feeling helpless but holding it all in. So I'm really looking forward to what our dads have to say and listening really hard, because I do think
Yeah,
it's a particular kind of hard for them.
It absolutely is. And it's interesting because when I've had single dads, they do everything the moms do.
Yeah.
I mean, they just become like one of our moms, you know? But when you have partners, husband and wife, mom and dad, moms very quickly fall into a certain role of just let me do whatever I can do.
Yeah.
And dads will often be the ones that are like, okay, she's taking charge of this, I will kind of just be on the outskirts more, you know, and they're less involved. And a lot of times I think I think they take it upon themselves, like they feel guilty, or they feel like they haven't done what they were supposed to do, or somehow it's their fault, or those types of things.
Do you know Moira Giammatteo? She's a TACA mom.
No.
We've had her on the show before. She and her husband do some seminars together. And one of the things that they talk about is that there's always a project manager for autism. And that if you decide...
Yeah, that's good.
Isn't that? And if you decide who the project manager is, but that doesn't mean that the whole weight of it falls on them, but that you designate and say, you know, and that a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times the mom is the project manager for autism, but, you know, the dad is busy keeping the roof over the head. That it sort of, you know, shakes down that way in a lot of families, but not in all of them. But they do a really great lecture about how you weather that.
Yeah, that's right.
Because, you know, it's tough.
Oh, it's tough. I mean, it's tough for, I you know, as you know, I'm a single mom, but like it's tough anyway, because when you have typically developing kids and you work, it's tough. Yeah. You know, and earlier we were talking about a lot of us moms are in that generation where we also have parents that we take care of. So it's sort of, it is very, very tough. And when you have a child with special needs, it's 10 times as tough, because they just have so much else going on.
And I also don't remember who, it might have been Holly Robinson Peete that came in and said, you know, imagine, you know, you're trying to figure it out for yourself, but imagine this crazy hope that both of you are going to be on the same page at the same moment always, and in step with each other about what should happen. It's kind of a crazy thought that we would think that was possible.
Yeah, and it isn't, because each of us are going through our own reflections and issues when something that drastic comes up. Yeah, it's a tough process.
It is a tough process. But, and I do know that it was Holly Robinson Peete who said that if there was one thing that she could do over, she would be a little bit more patient with her husband.
Right. And didn't Rodney Peete write a book about this?
Yes, he's got a great book out that's a great gift for Father's Day. If you haven't already gotten a gift, that would be a great gift to give this dad.
Right.
To see, because it brought Rodney Peete to his knees.
Yeah.
He had an idea that he was going to have a son, and his son was going to be the captain of the football team.
I know.
Because he was Rodney Peete.
Right.
And he was impervious, and nothing was going to happen to him, and it brought him to his knees.
Right.
And, you know, it's a very to the bone, honest book, but it's a great book for dads to read so that they don't feel alone.
Exactly.
And we've had some amazing, amazing dads for role models. I mean, Joe Mantegna, Gary Cole, Matt Asner.
Absolutely.
Ed Asner, who is both a dad and a grandfather of a child on the spectrum.
Right.
And they all have done interviews that either with us, because we've done interviews with all of them, but you can also find on YouTube where they talk about how they felt and the denial.
Right.
You know, we talk about that river in Egypt that we all like to float on. Denial.
No, it's very true. And it is a very common thing, actually, with, I think, and I'm not sure why, it has something to do with just early, when we're developing as girls or boys, boys tend to procrastinate a lot more. I think it has something to do with what they're gaining internal reward for. You know, girls always have this need or desire to please their parents. Boys not so much. And so over time, as we grow adulthood, usually men are, it's easier for them to procrastinate. And when there's this whole kind of there's two of you in a relationship, women are so immediate to jump on board and start doing anything. It's kind of like, let me just try to swim even though I don't know how to.
My phrase is, I'm going to do something even if it's wrong.
Right, exactly. And and men are more, let me plan what I have to, let me get this first, you know, so they're sort of slower, and often therefore the moms are just like running in a certain direction and the dads feel left out.
Interesting.
And it's really important that they be involved and that they open up and deal with their own issues around this. It's incredibly important, you know, because it does change your life in 1,000 different ways, and you have to be able to kind of come to terms with what it is, autism, and then move forward from there. Otherwise, you're just paralyzed and depressed.
Absolutely. Some of the best advice I ever got, and I wish I could remember who gave it to me, but when Jem was diagnosed and someone said, you know, hold on to your husband. And they said, and I mean literally hold on to them. And they said, think of making letters of the alphabet. And that as a husband and wife, you always want to be at least in the shape of an H, so that you're standing erect and holding hands. But when things are difficult, put your heads together and be an A.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice.
And I always have thought about that. We used to have a little sculpture in our house of two people holding hands and being in the shape of an A. Now my son broke it in a tantrum, but we weathered that and continued on.
That's really good.
You know, it is what it is. But yeah, I think about that from time to time, and when stuff gets tough, you know, we try to hold on to each other, and, you know, knock on wood, we have no wood. So far it's worked, but it's tough. It's really,
incredibly tough. Yeah.
Really tough.
It's incredibly tough.
Well, okay, thank you for that marriage advice. We're going to take a short break and come back more with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh. Keep your questions coming in on the live feature. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to Ask Dr. Doreen. We had a question that came in right at the end of our hour last week that I wanted to make sure that we got to this week. My son is a 4-year-old on the spectrum. He recently started telling people I talk to in public, hey, stop talking to my dad, while pointing his finger at the person. Any ideas to help me address it appropriately?
That is very cute. So, like anything else, you have to ask yourself why he does that. And I can only guess at a few things. You know your son much better, but so one thing would be he's just bored, because the duration of time that you're spending talking to someone else and he's not engaged, or even if he is understanding it, he's bored. It's not the topic that he wants to talk about. Another concept could be that he doesn't want to lose your attention. So you're attending to this other person, which to him means he's losing your time and attention, which is kind of the same thing. He wants you to be engaged with him. And I mean, there's two sides to this. One is you want to teach him not to tell people, don't talk to my dad. And the way to do that, obviously, is to show him that it can be a very short-term thing. So I would actually set up a scenario and practice it. So you'd have someone come up, and then you would just say, you know, hi, how are you? Fine, and so on, and then you'd go back with your son. And then you expand that a little bit so that the duration, perhaps, you want to teach your son essentially to be able to be patient and polite for, let's say, what is an appropriate time frame? I don't know, maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes. It's up to you and your own family rules. And you shape that up. And essentially, you know, one of the things, you could do a million different things to let your son know that this is going to be a short-term thing. You start with a short-term. You could actually give your child an egg timer, and they can turn it over, and when that's finished, you're finished talking. And that way your child will learn not to interrupt or be impolite during that 3-minute period, okay? On the other side, you want to make sure that you're not ignoring the child being there. A lot of times we don't see our kids as, you know, if you're with another adult, and let's say they speak a different language, and you run into a friend or an acquaintance, you would most likely not stand there and talk to the acquaintance for 10 minutes. You'd probably keep it really short just to be polite to the friend that you're with, right? And we need to kind of be the same with our kids, I think. It's just important to not make them wait for a very long period of time. So you balance it out. You decide what is appropriate. Like I said, maybe 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, and you teach your child that it's only ever going to be about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And if it's going to be more, then you just want to make sure your child is otherwise occupied.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a very basic, simple answer to that. I think the reason he does that is probably because he's either bored or wants your attention.
Yeah.
And of course, you don't want him to keep doing that because it's not really polite. But you also want to be fair with it and not keep him waiting a long time. And you can, like anything else, you shape everything up. So you start with just the 30-second, and you can take it up all the way to 5 minutes.
It's interesting. We've talked before about perspective taking, and that it's all too easy for us to want to teach our children to take our perspective, but that I know as a parent, I forget to take my child's perspective on a regular basis.
Right.
I just do. I have an unrealistic expectation and now I'm in the lovely, lovely position where he tells me.
Which is awesome.
It is, and it's a great gift. But he'll say to me, "Mom, I really don't want to go clothes shopping for 2 hours with you."
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Because
this is the
really,
statement of my son all the time.
Because really, why would he want to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. He hates it, and there's another really important concept that keeps coming back to me, which is time, right? The understanding of time. When you tell an adult something like, it'll just be 5 minutes, they have a very concrete understanding of what that means. And they know that 5 minutes will pass pretty fast. Kids don't. And our kids on the spectrum really don't. So when we tell our kids something like, you have to wait 5 minutes, you'll get it in 5 minutes, or I'll be right done. Those things mean nothing to our children. And sometimes to our kids, it's just, it's impossible for them to be patient because they don't know if it's really going to be a short period of time or it's going to be a long period of time, because time doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
So often I find that when I do things for my, let's say my older kids or my adults, and their biggest frustrations, I have an adult right now, or he's I think 19 or 20, and he's the sweetest character ever. I mean, this kid is just a beautiful human being, and he does so much. So it's like so many things are being taught to him right now, both vocational and just in school, and he just does everything. He's such a sweetheart. You just want to hug him all the time because he's so compliant. But then once in a while he'll want something, and if you just tell him, okay, later, or if you ignore his desire, he'll go into a full-blown massive tantrum, put his head through the window, everything. And it's because of the fact that he really doesn't understand later or this evening or tomorrow, any of that sort of stuff. And so right now we're focusing very much on his schedule and getting him to understand sort of what comes after each one and what is today and what's tomorrow, what's this afternoon, and all that. And I'm pretty sure that's significantly going to impact his behavior, because he is a very, very sweet personality. And if he knew that what he really wants is coming, and it's going to come after, let's say, these next 5 activities, he'd wait.
Yeah.
It's just that when he doesn't know when it's going to come, well, then he's getting no rewards. He doesn't know when his rewards are coming. It's kind of like I gave the example the other day to a school, and I said, you go to work and you're very tired in the morning. Assume that you're going into a difficult situation like work or school or something, and you just, who really wants to be there all the time unless you really love what you're doing? School, let's say, right? Most kids don't want to go to school, but they tolerate it because they know that there's the 3 p.m. bell. That means you're done. Okay? We as adults, we go to work and we might have an extremely exhausting night, and we go to work and we're tired, but we tolerate it and we push through it because we know that we're going to be done at 5, or at a certain point.
There will be
done.
an end.
There will be an end, and I will be able to go home and sleep or rest or whatever it is, right?
And there's a reasonable expectation of when the end is.
Exactly. It's like you gauge your ability. Like if I was sometimes, and as you know, with my crazy schedule, if I have I know that my day is going to be a 12-hour day, and then I'm traveling tomorrow and it's a nightmare and so on, I really have to work myself into it to say, I can do this.
Yeah.
I'm going to go till Friday and I'm going to rest on Saturday. I'm going to be able to do it. Whether it's a day or 5 days, it doesn't matter. It's like there is an end.
Yeah, and you pace yourself accordingly.
Right.
Right.
And with our kids, I don't think they have that concept. First of all, kids don't have that concept as a whole, which is why typically developing kids are like, Mom, when are we there? When are we there? When are we there? So that's, a very good indication of that. But especially with our kids on the spectrum, it's not something they track well in their mind. So they have a very hard concept of what is 5 minutes, what is a day.
Yeah.
And so making them wait is a very hard thing. And that's why I always recommend visuals to help them, because that's why, my kids, I put watches on them very early, and I tried to get them to understand, just digital watches even, just the concept of, okay, see when this goes 5 minutes, and then just to get the feeling of it, or to put an alarm on the watch, or give them an egg timer, or just a kitchen timer, some visual aspect of time, schedules that show 5 activities, and each activity is 10 minutes only, those types of things are very important.
Very interesting. There was just a show on the Fox network the other day about the brain and how the brain perceives time.
Right.
And it's a fascinating, and they had all these little, it was a test that you could take to see how you perceive time, and then they would show you, break down the science of why it was happening. It was fascinating. I've only watched the first half of it, but I watched it with my son, and because he loves to see all those
types of things.
And it's very interesting how we all perceive time, and how inaccurate all of us are, but then add autism onto that, and it's gonna be exacerbated.
Yes, and also, of course, the perception of time varies significantly based on what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Right? If you love what you're doing, time flies.
Yes.
If you don't like what you're doing, time is like I remember, Shannon, nowadays, I come to work and I don't even know how 8-10 hours goes by. I really don't, because I'm just running, and I love everything I do, and it's so busy. And I remember when I was young, making donuts at UCLA or something, and I swear it felt like 15 minutes was a century because I was so bored. So
absolutely. Well, really important though that we take our kids in a perspective, their perspective of how long it seems, because when we're standing there talking to somebody, what are they doing? Right. Interesting. Well, and sort of in keeping with what you're talking about, a viewer wants to know, did your children ever tantrum, and how did you deal with that? Oh my God. Now, I have said this about you when you're not here, that I'm a huge fan of yours, and you are the real deal. I've seen you work with children, and I've seen you in different meetings, and you're the real deal. And I have seen your children, and they're amazing children.
Yeah, and thank the Lord they don't tantrum anymore.
But your oldest child, who is nothing short of amazing. She truly is amazing. And she had told me a story recently, and you said that it was all right if I share.
Oh, of course.
That she talked about a long, long plane ride that you were on, and that your youngest daughter had reached critical mass, because who wouldn't?
Yes.
And that at a certain point you got up and went into the restroom and closed the door, and everybody thought she was having a tantrum, but that you had said to her, just go ahead and scream it out. I'm going to stand here as long as it takes.
Right. She was having a tantrum. She was having the biggest tantrum. The issue was, and I totally remember this, and of course she was I always say that, and I love her to death. She's actually the one that is almost identical me. It's unbelievable how much she is me. So it's kind of interesting. Of course, now she's 12 and beyond all of this, but I have to say that this is when she was 2 or something, and those were pretty tough days, because she, her, first of all kids, I think, get really easily agitated when they're tired. Yeah. And this was an 11-hour flight. We used to travel all the time to Europe, to Germany. Their dad is German. So, and there were times, Shannon, when I had, my little one would be 6 months, and my son would be 2, and Nikki would be 4. you know, or 5, and I'd be taking the 3 of them alone.
Wow.
And for 11 hours, and you want to like kill yourself. I mean, I had all these little techniques I'd use. You know, I'd go to 99-cent store and I'd buy 100 little things and wrap them all. In those days, you could take foil and stuff them in a big bag, and like approximately every 10 minutes, the kids would get to pick one, and it would take them a long time to open it and then play with it, and that's how we occupied ourselves. But this particular time, we were coming back, I think, to LA, and I think Charlie, it was just something about, she was exhausted and she didn't want to sleep. She was a baby. Like, I literally remember that she was maybe 1.5.
Wow.
She was really little, and she didn't want the food, and so she took the food thing and threw it, right? And she just was having a full meltdown.
Wow.
And it was hard for me because, like, there's all this stuff on the floor, the stewardesses are looking at you. I had a lot of arguments with flight attendants in those days. So I thought, all right, what am I going to do? You know, I took her to the bathroom and I said, go for it, you know? And I stood there and I remember her freaking out, and I remember thinking, if somebody can hear this, they're going to come and like think I'm abusing my child or something, and I'm just standing here looking and thinking, how long is this going to go? The only thing I did is I kind of splashed water on her face a few times to calm her down. It did take a while, though. I think it went on for about 40 minutes of screaming, and then after that she wiped herself. She was just exhausted, so she came and laid in my arms and slept. But I
love the idea of you standing there and saying, okay, you're having your feelings that you're having, and that you didn't take it on.
Oh, you know, having said that, there are times where I did take it on.
Okay.
I mean, it's impossible for a parent not to get involved when your child is, oh my gosh, it's like, they are out of control and unreasonable, so you can't even slow them down enough, right? You can't really calm them because they don't want calming, they just want a tantrum. You're in a public place, so you don't really have the opportunity, and you have the other 2 to worry about.
Yeah.
Like, it is... There have been times where afterwards I'd just sit there and I'd be sweating and I'd be like, oh my Lord, what did I just go through?
Yeah.
You know, so it is a very, very normal process because kids, it's not like kids are born knowing all the rules. They don't. Yeah. So we teach our kids the rules, right? I mean, and sometimes they will object. And tantruming is the earliest form of objecting. And so it's perfectly fine to do those things when you're that young and you can't really express, like a 2-year-old, you don't expect them to be able to identify and say, I'm really tired, I'm sick and tired of being on this 11-hour flight, I don't like the food, there's no movies I can watch, and I'd just like to scream my head off now.
I think we've all felt that way from time to time.
And they don't have the tolerance. So you, A, have to try to keep them engaged, and B, you have to kind of accept the fact that sometimes they're babies and they're going to complain. But oh my gosh, yeah, I had all of my kids have been through those stages, of course. You work with tantrums and challenging behavior. You teach, you know, the child how to self-regulate. And it doesn't matter. Every child starts out with that, and it's just a matter of giving them enough resources to be able to, so that they can self-regulate, they can calm themselves down. Yeah. You know, now if any of my kids get upset about something, we will have a conversation about it. They'll go and chill out in their room, and I won't let them not talk about it. I will not let them just you know, put it inside and not discuss it, because they'll come back down. I will say, we got to talk about this. And after they're calm, they'll come back and we'll discuss it. And sometimes I'm wrong, and I will apologize, and I'll say, I totally did not see your perspective, and I get it. And this is how you want to deal with it. And thank God, you know, at this age, 12, 14, and 18, or almost 18, you can actually come to that level. But when they're kids, it's all behavioral therapy. It's all just the same stuff.
So interesting.
But I often say with Charlie, my little one, you know, the first 2 were so easy, he and Sunny, behaviorally. And with Charlie, it was kind of like God said, you've had it a little bit too easy. Here's this one. Have fun with this.
Oh, but I will say this, that because I do say this all the time, because you are the real deal. I've seen you work with a child that you know, and with a child that you don't know. I've seen you work with my child. The first time that you had an opportunity to work with my child, you had a cold that any sane person would have been home in bed. And they were going to be doing some filming for a news thing, and you'd never met my child before. You knew me, but you hadn't met my child before. And you got down on the floor and played with little Native American toys with my son.
That's amazing.
And built something
no
with him.
memory of this.
And I remember thinking, bless, I don't know how she's doing that, because you weren't feeling well, and my child had a cold. I mean, like, nobody was feeling well, but you got down on the floor and played with him. And then when they were done filming and the camera crew left, I expected you to go, okay, I gotta leave. But you sat and you played with him for longer. You weren't just going to abruptly leave him. And a lot of people would be that way. But you aren't, and I've seen how you are with children.
I love the kids.
You have such a gift, and you have such a passion for it. I just love the kids.
They're so cool. They're the best. They're awesome. But I have to say, like, from looking at myself over the course of the last, 30 years of working with kids on the spectrum, I have, once you become a mom, things change quite a bit. And once you get a little bit older, I'm older now, from a behaviorist perspective, I think a lot of people, I'm more of a psychologist than a behaviorist, I think, now, whereas you used to be more of a behaviorist when I was younger. I think I really understand kids really, really well, and especially kids on the spectrum, and I really immediately can see the world from their perspective, so it's very easy for me to communicate with them. But I mean, I have now entered the age, Shannon, where all I really want to do is hug the kids, and that's not good. So it's kind of like, I have too much compassion for my kids now. I'll tell my supervisors what they need to do, but I can't be the one to implement it necessarily in certain cases, because all I really want to do is just sit and hug them and hold them and like protect them and all this stuff you're not really supposed to do when they're having a behavioral issue.
Well, that's okay. You have people to be the bad cop. You can be the good cop.
Yeah. I just love, they're just such cool, amazing souls, they're just such great people.
Well, and I see that you see them that way, which is an amazing gift. That's an amazing gift. There are a lot of cold people in this field.
Yeah, I know. But how could you not see a child anyway? Yeah. Any child. How could you not see any child as good?
There are people, and it's you're so refreshing. And then on top of that you have such a gift that you see what they need and your expertise. So it's a lovely thing. We should take a break and come back with some more of your questions. And if you continue to bring them in, we'll have even more to answer. Stick with us. Welcome back to Ask Dr. Doreen. We're here with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh answering your questions. You can continue to ask them on the live feature at www.autism-live.com. The next question that we have, do children who aren't speaking at a young age ever recover?
Oh, yes. I mean, and I don't know what the parent means in terms of a young age, but certainly I've had kids who were, I had a child who came in, I started at 5 with him, at 5. And at 5, he had somewhere close to maybe 30 single labels. And of course, at 3, he didn't have any. And at 4, he had very few. And so, having just about 30 single object labels at 5 would be considered very delayed. And of course, he's typical and in college and doing extremely well. So yes, you do recover. I've had that happen a few times. The verbal thing, typically what they say, I guess there was this test that was made at UCLA called the Early Learning Measure, and the development of verbal skills once you are in a good behavioral program is pretty critical to recovery. But having said that, if a child hasn't had the opportunity to learn, then it doesn't matter if they're nonverbal, right? You want to give them the opportunity to learn, and really the opportunity should go on intensively. If it's a young child, intensive ABA, somewhere around 30, 40 hours of ABA per week, for about a year. And that's the point where you decide, I mean, you'll see it right away. First of all, it's not like you won't see anything and then suddenly you'll have labels at a year. No, it's like a month in, 2 months, 3 months in. And if you have been able to eliminate all the other problems, like sort of problem behaviors are down, biology is good, child's sleeping, all that sort of stuff, and now you're teaching and the child's picking up, you see it all the time. I mean, that is the indication for me in the first year, is like how much growth does the child have in the first year, and that's my indication of how well they're going to do. And by the way, I also want to say that I have some completely non-verbal kids who are ridiculously intelligent, like 2 standard deviations above the norm IQ, you know, extremely bright kids. And no one has, you know, maybe they've picked up 50 request labels, but no one's even, it's not occurred to anyone that language is way too hard for this child. Why don't I just teach them either sign or an augmentative device or what, you know? And once you do, the child's like almost like normal, except they're typing, right. You know, so you just have to give the child every opportunity, I suppose is what I'm saying. Like, you don't have to be verbal. So, but if you're talking about full, you know, recovery, then that includes verbal. And usually within 6 to 12 months after an intensive ABA program, you can see if there's been adequate growth in language. And if not, then you're going to be switching gears and going into sort of a nonverbal type program.
But even then, as you were saying, those individuals can get to the point where they have functional communication.
Oh, there's no question about that. It's just that, you know, social skills development becomes very, very hard when you're nonverbal, unless, and we've had this happen as well, but it's much less frequent, where the child is able to communicate now, and now their social environment becomes sort of a school for hearing impaired kids, for instance. And then they become more infused when they're in that program, because all the kids are communicating that way.
Right.
Otherwise, you take a hearing impaired child or a child who is nonverbal and has some form of autism, and you place them in normal environment, well, the hearing impaired child won't interact either.
Right.
It's just, that's what it is.
Right. Interesting. Very interesting. We've had 2 different questions about, one about movie talk and another one about how to get a 4-year-old to stop self-talk.
Right. Okay, so I'll try to not go into too much on this. So movie talk and self-talk might be even similar, because I don't like, okay, so movie talk is generally just repeating things from movies. And when I see kids doing that, sometimes it's in context, which is kind of interesting. Like, they'll learn something from a movie and they'll use it appropriately.
Right.
But it's fully scripted.
Right.
But it's appropriate when they say it.
Right.
And sometimes it's completely out of context, so they'll just be repeating something because they're thinking it. And these are different things. They're completely different things. So the first one, if a child is like repeating something, but they're trying to use it in a functional way, that's what they're doing. They're learning language from movies, and they're trying to use it in a way that is useful to them.
So maybe leave that alone.
Well, I would leave it alone if it's a child who's in language development phase, right? If they're trying to learn language, I wouldn't, you never really want to shut down a child's language if it's somewhat appropriate. Right. You kind of want to steer it rather than shut it down. If it's inappropriate, so if it's like repetitive in nature or something that is really not adaptive in any way, then I'd want to shut it down. But the way that you do that is basically you want to limit those opportunities. So the movies, perhaps a lot of our kids get hooked on one movie versus like they'll want to see the same thing 10 times in a row. So that is the one that you probably want to take away. And if your child has a really hard time with that, then maybe once a week as a major reinforcer, they get to see that. But if they start to imitate a lot of movies, you might want to just put movies on break for a little bit and start to go other things, like use that skill. I mean, this is a child who's actually imitating from visual and auditory. So, hey, let's give them some educational programs on TV that they could mimic or model from. But
and we don't get into a discussion about that and say, we're not watching movies because you're repeating them. You just distract them with other things.
It depends on the child's functioning. Like, again, it's like if it's a very high functioning child who completely understands what the contingency is, and they'll say, I got it, I won't repeat anymore.
Right.
Then you let them watch it.
Don't take away my movie, I won't repeat anymore.
Right. But if it's a child that doesn't get the contingency, don't get into an argument, for sure. Yeah, and just like take it away and replace it. We have this with a lot of our kids, and I think it's important to understand there's more to it. There's a lot to discuss on this subject, because sometimes our kids, there are some children who really live in a fantasy world, and they love that. And that is a little bit more important to deal with, because you really want them to kind of be aware of, or at some point you need to teach them the difference between make-believe, fantasy, costumes, dress up, and normal. And that's not something I'd be doing with the child until past, let's say, 5 or so.
Okay.
But then it goes into like sort of the play curriculum, because that's where you're starting to teach them about pretend and pretend play and fantasy and dress up and all that. And then there are some kids who are saying a lot of stuff because they don't differentiate between thinking and saying. And we have lessons for that in our cognitive curriculum, which have to do with just, think versus say.
Yes.
And
I need to tighten up on that myself from time to time.
I did too. But it is so like, and those are lessons where we're teaching our kids the difference between thinking something and then saying it out loud, and we will actually practice those things with our kids. So really, there's at any given age, movie talk or self-talk, we'll talk about in a second.
Okay.
But movie talk can be. The function of it could be a different thing. It could be just trying to communicate, trying to interact. It could be repetitive, just so that the child feels there might be saying it and laughing. Some of the kids will just enjoy repeating it, and that's perfectly fine. We also will think of something funny and laugh and then explain it to others. Our kids just don't have the contextual ability. Sometimes with some of our kids, what we do is we'll teach them to say, I was watching a movie the other day and this happened, and then they can say it. So kind of introducing the subject, that's one of our lessons as well, is because everything else about it is fine. If you look at kids, they're typically developing kids, they're always doing that. They're always talking about, did you see on that movie when he did blah, blah, blah? But if they didn't say did you see on that movie, the whole thing would be weird.
Right.
So you just have to introduce the topic appropriately, and then you can talk about it.
Right.
But then we have to teach our kids to talk about it for a limited period of time and not obsess on it. So these are many different lessons. Right. Now, self-talk sometimes, and I don't know if the parent is referring to self-talk in the way that I think about it.
Okay.
But self-talk is sometimes talking yourself, is kind of giving yourself instructions. Like I've had kids who are the cutest ever, and they do things like, I can do this, I can do this, and that's very normal, and like I wouldn't really touch that very much. So other than that, I'm not sure if the parents who mentioned self-talk is really also referring to movie talk. They might also be talking about echolalia, I don't know, like repetitious sounds or words.
Okay, interesting. All right, I'm going to move on to another question then. Give me 1 second here, because I was so interested in what you were saying.
And I often go into so much on these things, and I always do it with the assumption that if the parent wants to know more about this, I hate referring people back to skills all the time, but really all of these concepts are detailed in great depth in skills, and then just everything that I said and 100 things more are written in skills about how to teach, how to stop things like movie talk.
Interesting. Okay, so we've got a mom who wrote in and said, I'm very mad that my child has autism and doesn't speak.
I'm very mad.
Yeah, and I'm furious that we had to fight to get services, and I'm terrified about what would have happened if we hadn't gotten ABA. What is it going to take to change the equation? I'd like to know your opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm very mad too, and I have been for a really long time. I guess for me it's a little bit easier because I've been in the world of autism for 30 some odd years and I've seen things improve. I guess I went through different phases. First I was just shocked, and then I was like more shocked. You know, with autism it's not just oh my gosh, it's like hard to get someone to actually diagnose appropriately, and even harder to get someone who's going to tell you the truth about what the options are, and that there are a lot of options, because most people don't even know that. Then once you're past the diagnostic phase, which is hard enough on its own, it's a battle to get funding. And once you're past that, it's a battle to get a good provider. I mean, it's just non-stop, you know. So autism it's a crazy field. It has challenges all around it. But it's improved, you know. It's improved slowly, considering how fast the rate of autism has increased, you know. But it has improved. We now have 33 states that have insurance funding for ABA, thank God.
Yes.
We now have thousands of BCBAs where, you know, 20 years ago we didn't have any. We now have centers at pretty much all universities that recognize what autism is. A lot of pediatricians are getting trained better. A lot of things are changing. It's just so, it seems slow because autism's growing so fast. So in contrast, it is slow. I don't blame you for being angry. I guess a lot of parents turn that anger into doing something productive, you know, like you, Shannon, and this program, for instance, is so helpful to so many people. I have, you know, a lot of the parents who are my friends, like Thea Davis that I talk about a lot. She, of course, became a BCBA and has an awesome program on the East Coast. Bonnie Yates, who is a lawyer and started practicing special ed and just getting funding for a lot of families. I could go on and on and on.
Yeah.
I mean, the entire Act Today board, they're all parents, and they all are doing incredible things and fundraising and helping other people. So as a parent, I think where you see things are lacking, jump in and help. That we all have to work together to get things to be better.
I think that's a really good point, and I think that you don't have to, it doesn't have to be something big, even if it's just going on Facebook and when you see somebody, even we ask a question of the day, and sometimes parents will write things in, and I see other parents step in and say, you know, here's what I did about this, here's something you should be aware of, and I know that both of those parents feel better afterwards.
And I absolutely agree with that, and I have to say, there hasn't been a single change that wasn't initiated by a parent in this field. Everything is pushed by parents. The parents are amazing. And so, you know, direct your anger, I guess, and redirect it into this energy.
It is energy.
Yeah.
And I've told the story before here that I would not be here, and my child would not be where he is if somebody hadn't told me about CARD. And it was a parent who told me, and I've gone back to that parent, you know, every couple of months I go back to her and say, how am I ever going to repay you? And what she said to me very early on was, you're not going to, you're going to pay it forward. And she said, I will expect you to go find other parents to tell them.
Right.
And she says to me now, I didn't know you were going to take it so literally, Shannon.
But it's so true, and I love that, because the whole concept of paying it forward, I think, just in life, not just about this this world of autism, but just in life, is something we should always be spreading. And it truly is. I mean, if you think of the families that have found some help because of this show, because of what you do every day, it's unbelievable. If you think of all the families who've received help because of Nancy and Act Today and what she does, and under any circumstances, under the most stressful circumstances, you know, you both and many other parents are just doing what they can for kids. So we're all contributing to it and moving it forward.
We hold a hand out to the people who are ahead of us, who have done things before us, and we hold a hand back to the people who are coming behind us. And in that way, I always say, if we all hold hands together, we'll get there eventually.
Right.
And progress, you know, progress is the name of the game for our kids, so it has to be the name of the game for the entire community and how we move forward.
Absolutely.
I know it's all easy to say only 33 states have insurance reform. Well, really, there should be a federal mandate, and I would agree with you wholeheartedly. But the fact that we have 33 states, and I was told that in my lifetime we would not have one state that would have insurance reform in my lifetime.
I started in this field in 1978, right? And when the insurance mandate started to happen about 3 or 4 years ago, I said I did not think this would happen in my lifetime. I didn't think it would, and it is spectacular. It's hard. It's very, very hard to deal with the carriers. They don't understand what this is. I don't think they understood when they signed on that it would be a massive undertaking. And we fight with them, we argue, we convince them, they convince us, we compromise all sorts of stuff. But hey, they're funding thousands of kids. It's fabulous.
It is fabulous. It's a step in the right direction, and we'll continue to take steps in the right direction. But unfortunately, we're out of time.
Right.
But I so appreciate you being here and answering our questions, and it's always an opportunity to learn and have more questions.
Yeah.
I hate to let you go.
We'll be here next week.
We'll be here next week.